Once my parents showed up, that's when I really kind of started remembering stuff, and they showed up about 24 hours after the crash because they couldn't figure out who we were.
Lileana says emergency responders used her and her boyfriend's driver's licenses to try and find their families. Through Google, they discovered she worked for WBTV.
And they got in contact with work, and work gave them my parents' numbers because they were my emergency contact.
Her parents would soon learn Lileana was in an ICU in Savannah.
They had to put 2 people's worth of blood into me because my legs wouldn't stop bleeding.
Both of Lileana's femurs, a foot, and the top of her knee were broken. She also had internal injuries.
They ended up taking about a foot of intestine out, sewed up my bowels that had lacerations on it, and that's all they had to do to me internally.
Lileana says she was on so much pain medication, it was more than a week before she really knew what happened.
I just spent the whole day crying because it's like finally you kind of like start to realize what this all actually means, and you just have this flood of emotions that all this medication has been holding off.
Lileana's boyfriend suffered broken ribs and a broken hand and also had internal injuries. He was able to go home about a week after the crash. But with 2 broken femurs and metal rods surgically implanted to take their place, Lileana's recovery was just beginning.
I literally had 2 physical therapists when I was in Georgia just like grab me under my arms and they just haul you up, and it's awful. It is so awful. There's a mirror in front of you and they tell you to look into the mirror, and you just like you're staring at yourself. I knew that it had to be done.
2 weeks after the crash, Lileana was transferred to Atrium Health's Carolinas Rehabilitation in Charlotte. She would undergo 3 to 4 hours of therapy a day.
That was the first thing we had to work through, was just how to help her get out of bed without having too much pain so she could start getting into a wheelchair. She could start the process of maybe standing and then ultimately walking.
For Lily, we use an assessment here, and basically when she came in the first day, she scored like 0%. She was needing help with everything. She was needing help getting in and out of the shower, getting, to the bathroom, dressing.
I was up in a walker and I couldn't even do 6 feet of distance, and I'm literally like all upper body strength.
But after 2 weeks of intense physical and occupational therapy, Lileana would eventually score 100% on that same assessment.
It's incredible what they were able to do in 2 weeks. Both Krista and Kim hold such a special place in my heart.
Those same therapists cheered Lileana on as she rang the rehab bell, meaning she was cleared to go home to continue recovery.
I mean, I cried, and her mom was there and she cried, but that's probably my favorite part about going through the rehab process.
That's a pretty good kick. That's a pretty good kick. So I do my little kicks.
Lileana's road is still a long one. This adventure lover has more mobility to gain, and some healing is more than physical.
I think the hardest part is, again, just more of like the mental aspect of it, of like, yeah, just like being 25 years old and you need to be tended to by this whole host of people.
But Lileana says she's learning to accept the help, and she's focused on getting back to work one day and telling stories she'll see in a whole new way.
Going through this experience has definitely changed the way that I experience news now. I can't tell you how many times, if I were covering my own accident, I would say there was a 2-car accident, 2 people taken to the hospital with serious injuries. And then you kind of move on to the next story. And now I can't help but think so much about like what is happening to these people once they get to the hospital, because I was that person that was transported with serious injuries. And now that's really all I can think about is this, and I think that I'm going to have a level of empathy that I've never had before. I've always tried to be empathetic towards people, but I don't think you can actually understand what's happening to people until you've lived it.